Alrighty, everyone. Well, it's just about 12:01, so we'll go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to be covering some details regarding cryptocurrency investing through IRAs. Certainly, with the cryptocurrency markets being as popular and uh, exciting right now, it's a good time for us to cover some of these things as far as how to do them in an IRA to make sure that you're not paying any more taxes than you certainly need to be in your personal life. Just one item. I don't know if it's Clay or Renika. There's a lot of static and noise coming in through one of your lines. We can just. All right, looks like we got that fixed. All right, so your presenters today, my name is Alex Perney. I've been with Advanta IRA since about 2012. I'm a certified IRA services professional here at Advanta. My other two colleagues joining us today are Clay and Renika. Renika has been with us for about 2 years in our Atlanta office. She's another one of our education and marketing representatives. Clay Malcolm, although he hasn't been with Advanta for as long as maybe Renika has a lot of experience in self-directed IRAs through his professional career. So he's going to be adding in a great section to this presentation with regards to his thoughts and ideas, and also Renika as well. So please do make sure that you ask any questions. The content's going to shift a little bit throughout the presentation. So if you have a question on one section, just make sure you do type that in, and we will certainly address all of those questions at the end of the presentation. Now, Advanta, here at Advanta IRA, we do not provide any tax or legal advice. Our employees do not provide anything that should be used as tax or legal advice. All information and materials are for educational purposes today. All parties are encouraged to consult with their attorneys, accountants, and financial advisors before entering into any type of financial investment, and that especially holds true with something that can be as volatile as cryptocurrencies. Please just keep in mind that with the information you get here today, make sure you check with someone who is a certified professional to maybe advise you on which way to go. Use this as a good baseline. Certainly feel free to ask us any questions. Contact either myself, Renika, or Clay. We're more than happy to expound on some of the rules and regulations with regards to this stuff, but please do understand that this is for informational purposes only, and with the nature of cryptocurrency, it's always a good idea to get a second, maybe a third opinion before jumping into the actual investments. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Clay, who is going to be speaking to you here regarding some of the points on investing in cryptocurrency. So Clay, if you'd like to take it from here.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. Thanks for the setup. And yeah, my part today is going to be a lot about kind of the environment of IRA investing in cryptocurrency, because it really is it's an interesting and evolving environment. You may be familiar with some of these cryptocurrencies. I've put a few of the more popular or better known ones on here. There's by no means an exhaustive list. There are dozens and dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of possible cryptocurrencies that could be investments for your IRA. And remember that, at our core, always what we're talking about at Advanta in a self-directed IRA is combining the tax tool of the account type with the investment. And my colleagues will get into a little bit more of that nuts and bolts a little bit later. But the idea is that your IRA money, once it's been contributed, can invest in these cryptocurrencies. Now, I think that there's an enormous amount of vocabulary difficulty in this arena, and as there is in a lot of self-directed IRA things, but this one in particular. And frankly, not all cryptocurrency or tokens or things that you might buy are the same thing. I remember going to blockchain conferences, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Well, probably 5 years ago. And there were people there was during the time of the ICO craze, so an initial coin offering. And so the SEC was very involved in kind of looking at this particular type of investment, because it seemed like more of an equity investment than it was a currency, even though they were labeled as currencies. And frankly, in those conferences, in kind of the early days of the beginning of the popularity of these types of investments, there was a lot of evolution in what these cryptocurrencies were being called and how they were labeled and what their function was. And I remember, maybe a year after that conference, they were starting to divide the vocabulary into securitized tokens and things like that, whereas some were and some weren't. And so I guess my point is just that this is an ever evolving and a very new kind of environment. And so one of the things that I think is important about being able to invest your IRA in it is agility and the ability to kind of adjust to what's happening and changes in the environment. And so, again, on its core, what we're talking about today is your IRA being able to invest in these cryptocurrencies. And then what we're going to be talking about more is the considerations for how you do that, what kinds of criteria you would use, and things like that. So again, on this, I'll just stress that this is a very short list and not exhaustive, because there are dozens and dozens of cryptocurrencies that you might consider investing in. All right, so thinking about some of the investment considerations for your IRA. What currencies are available? And what I mean by that is that can occur on a couple of different levels. It can occur on the level of the IRA custodian. It can occur at the level of the exchange, and it can also just kind of occur in terms of your ability to buy and sell them, right? So one of the things that you're looking at, I think, from a investment standpoint is, do you know which currencies or tokens or investments that you want to make, and are they available through the mechanism that you're going to use? And the reason I say mechanism is because IRA custodians are offering all kinds of different scenarios for how you get into cryptocurrencies. So finding out which ones you want to get involved with and having an idea of that will help you to then be able to vet the custodian that you're thinking about to handle that, and also if the exchange that you're thinking about working through can handle it. Now, my next criteria there is how fast can you buy and sell? And one of the reasons for that, of course, is the volatility of this particular marketplace, right? So there are a number of, again, offerings that are out there in terms of IRA cryptocurrency IRAs. Not all of them are able to buy and sell very fast, right? So they don't all settle at the same amount of time. Your ability to get onto a platform to trade, to buy or sell, could be different depending upon how you choose it. So one of the things that I think is really important in terms of you're thinking about your own strategy is, however I set this IRA investment up, what kind of timetable or responsiveness do I have when it comes to when I want to sell? And so the ability for that, again, can come into play with perhaps the exchange that you're using. It may be that the IRA provider is offering a platform to trade on. It may be that they're not offering a platform to trade on. Some of the IRA offerings out there are very manual. And so finding out what the procedure is to buy and sell and how fast that can be accomplished could be an important thing, especially because you might find the top of the market and want to get out, or you might find the bottom of the market and want to get in. And to some extent, that ability to transact is going to be affected by how you set up the IRA investment. The when can you buy and sell part is another part and parcel to that, which is that, do you have the ability to get on a platform that's 24/7, or is it a more manual process? Can you only buy and sell or trade during regular business hours? Things like that. So there are IRA providers out there that are going to offer things like that, where you may have some restrictions. And so again, if that fits with your investment strategy, that's fine, but do understand that that may be a criteria that you want to investigate. What kind of technology do you need? There are certainly platforms out there where you need to be able to Zoom or have some other sort of video conferencing ability. That's become relatively pedestrian here in the days of COVID-19. But you may have the necessity of identifying yourself with some technology or being able to be live on video in a certain technology in order to execute a trade. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why these things are in play. But do understand that when you're investigating how your IRA can invest, you're thinking about how do I have the ability to, again, buy and sell, transact, and what technology do I need personally to be able to participate in that? Next thing, can you move from one exchange to another? As I mentioned before, the different exchanges offer different abilities to purchase, to sell, to trade, things like that. And even in a particular exchange, there are levels usually, sometimes there's beginner, intermediate, and advanced, things like that. So I'll just share a personal story. I have a few cryptocurrency investments, and one of the exchanges that I'm on decided that one of those currencies, they wanted to suspend the trading of it. I unfortunately had turned off my notifications, so I was I was a little bit surprised when I found that out. But the point is that exchange is no longer going to be viable if I want to stay in that investment. So having the ability to move that to a different exchange is going to give me the ability to trade it again and to buy and sell. And those decisions are made on an exchange level. And again, this is a new and burgeoning industry, so the exchanges themselves are changing. I know that there have been several security changes, the adoption of different cryptocurrencies on exchanges that I'm on. So that match of what do I want, what cryptocurrency do I want to invest in? Does this exchange allow for that? How does that work? It is something that you need to investigate, because it's not always the case. Not all exchanges trade all cryptocurrencies and have the ability to transact the way that you want to. So thinking about what exchange you want to be in if you are at one, and can you move to another one? So all of these things are things to look into. Storage type. There are a number of different ways to store your cryptocurrency. Some of them are offline, some of them are online. There's super encrypted online ones. There's offline ones that are essentially a device. Once you've loaded it with your cryptocurrency, you take it out, and it's a physical device that gets pulled off the internet, so that it's, again, cold storage, so that nobody can get at it and tamper with it, things like that. So, but the evolution of storage and which you should choose and which you're most comfortable with is part of the criteria that you'll want to look into, because it really makes a difference in terms of a couple of things. One, the security, but two, again, do you have the ability to trade that cryptocurrency quickly? So if you're in cold storage and you don't have the cold storage device with you, in other words, it's being held by your custodian, how fast can they get the cryptocurrency into position to be able to have a transaction occur with it? So if I'm looking at my IRA's cryptocurrency investment, one of the things I'm asking the custodian is, hey, how do I get access to this? If you're offering storage for me for my IRA, how do I get access to that so that I can make sure that I can transact the way that I want to? Next thing, how do you get cash? Well, so the cryptocurrency obviously is purchased through an exchange, or an intermediary to the exchange. So your IRA sends cash somewhere, that cash gets converted or purchases cryptocurrency. And then you also want to make sure that you have the ability to sell back into fiat currency if that's what your end game is going to be. Now, it may not be. You may actually be buying this cryptocurrency to utilize as currency at some point down the road. And of course, you can take an an in-kind distribution of the cryptocurrency. That's definitely an available piece of business for you. But if your plan is going to be, hey, I want the cryptocurrency to be an investment in a kind of a traditional sense, and at some point I'm going to convert it back into fiat currency and then distribute that to myself, well, that's something that you need to know how that process works, how do you get it, and how long does it take. Insurance, that's something that is often being touted when it comes to storage, and as well as certain IRA offerings, as well as non-IRA investment. Does the purchase and holding arrangement that you have set up, does that include insurance? And if so, what does the insurance cover? What's the levels? All those types of things. Is that important to you? All those types of things are one of the criteria that you might want to think about. And then I'll say this from a strategy standpoint, that a lot of the things that are in the list above this one have to do with or your choice may have to do with how quickly you're going to want to transact. I keep harping on that because the ability to get in and out of cryptocurrency may mean the difference between making some money and making a lot of money, or making some money or losing a lot of money. I mean, that ability to adjust to what's going on seems particularly important in a marketplace that has some volatility like cryptocurrencies do. So one of the things that you may be thinking about as an investor is, are you really doing this as a buy and hold long-term strategy? Thinking, okay, well, such and such cryptocurrency I believe is going to go up over time. I'm willing to hold on to it for 10, 15, 20 years, and then I'll see what I'm going to do with it. Or are you more of a trader? Hey, I see that there's a trend going here. I'm going to exchange some of this one cryptocurrency for another and let it go for a couple of weeks and see if that, and take a small profit and bring that back. One of the things that's really powerful about the combination of cryptocurrency and IRAs is to adding the tax advantages to this type of earnings potential. So your ability to trade and transact, that may be the way that you want to go, and having the ability to do that can alter where you have your IRA set up and how you have it set up. And this is probably not a secret to a lot of you. The way that Advanta IRA has set up cryptocurrency investment at this point is through an LLC, commonly known as a checkbook control kind of scenario. So your IRA has an LLC as a subset of it, and that's how the IRA money gets sent down to the LLC level, and then the LLC goes to the exchanges. And we're going to talk in quite a bit more depth about that later. Alex actually has done kind of a case study about how that works, so we'll get to that in a moment. But all of these criteria are things that you would be hopefully have an idea of what you wanted to have available to you as you then go out into the marketplace and look at how your IRA is going to be set up to invest in crypto. Okay, I mentioned the fact that this is a relatively new environment, and so there's an interesting thing that happens with IRA custodians, right? So like Advanta, we are charged with actually maintaining custody of the assets. An IRA is a little trust, right? And that's why you have to have a custodian for it. Part of the trust system. It's also part of the tracking system that the IRS requires because of the special tax benefits. So the custodian is required by the regulators to have control over those assets. If the IRA holder, generally speaking, if they're able to simply, go and take their asset or liquidate it or whatever without the knowledge of the custodian, that's not something that the IRS wants, obviously, again, because of the tax advantages. Special tax advantages means special tracking, and that means that they want to have the ability for some part of the trust system to be in control of those assets, and that's what the custodian is doing. And so one of the things that is so unusual and revolutionary about, you know, blockchain type products, and a lot of these cryptocurrencies are based on that, of course. And so one of the things that it does is it allows for a singular person to control the access to that cryptocurrency. And so shared access, in other words, when an IRA custodian has a property, let's say, let's use real estate. Real estate, the deed is in the name of the IRA, typically speaking. And so for that property to be sold, the IRA's signature person, the person who signs for that on behalf of that entity, is the custodian, right? But when you're doing storage in cryptocurrency, that's a very tough thing to do because it's harder to share the access to the actual control of the asset. So there's been a lot of time and energy spent on the part of IRA custodians trying to interact with these exchanges in such a way that the IRA custodian can say, yes, I had the absolute unequivocal permission of the account holder to make this purchase on behalf of the IRA, and that the exchange or wherever, or the storage device or wherever the crypto is being held, is in control of the custodian. Now, one of the things about having that LLC, that checkbook control of the LLC as a subset of your IRA, is that it actually, that control part to a large extent becomes the role of the LLC's manager, typically the account holder. So that obviates the need, or changes the need for the IRA custodian to be involved in every single trade or every single activity that occurs with the cryptocurrency. And so one of the reasons that this idea of having your LLC, your IRA-owned LLC, be the actor when it comes to cryptocurrency investing, is because it gives you a tremendous amount of agility as the decision maker, as the account holder for the IRA. Your ability to change exchanges, to change storage strategies, to change cryptocurrencies, all of those things, the agility level goes up by a lot when you're talking about that setup in comparison with some of the other IRA cryptocurrency offerings. And so that's, again, one of the reasons why we feel like it's such a powerful way for your IRA to invest in cryptocurrency. So remember this too, in terms of this environment. An IRA is obviously its own legal and financial entity. It's separate from you personally. It has its own bank account, has its own tax ID number, has its own name. But IRAs are, because of the fact that a custodian is attached to it, because it's a trust, can be a little bit clumsy and a little bit slow. And frankly, IRAs as an entity, as a legal entity out there, are largely misunderstood. So, you know, having somebody or having your IRA have a clear path to participate in an exchange can be a little bit difficult, because the exchanges are still, you know, creating their offerings. When they see an LLC come over, when an exchange comes over to see sees an LLC come over and apply for an account, that's a much more understandable entity for them than an IRA. And so that also is one of the things that creates this agility for your cryptocurrency investing from an IRA standpoint, is that the LLC is the entity that is establishing the account at the exchange or with the vendor. And that's a relatively, you know, a better known entity than the way that that an IRA works. So that's something that's been part of the evolution of how IRA cryptocurrency investing has gone. So purchase, storage, and sales, all of these things would have to understand an IRA custodial arrangement and be able to accommodate the custodial needs as well as the needs of the account holder and the decision maker. And you know, again, my experience from which is, you know, three or so exchanges and a certain amount of cryptocurrencies, has been that it really is evolving. And so thinking that you are, walking into a well-trodden, well-understood, completely mature investment ecosystem, I think at this point is I just don't think it's there yet. And so remembering that there is some evolution going on is another reason to kind of think about your ability to adjust to what's changing in that environment. And so let's just talk about some of the things. So I did a survey of cryptocurrency IRA offerings out there, and obviously the amount that it's going to cost you to get your IRA, your tax advantage dollars into cryptocurrency and out, is going to be part of your ROI and an important part of the equation. So the things that you will be out there looking and evaluating are these. I saw annual fees and monthly fees for certain providers. And sometimes they're a percentage, and sometimes they're flat, and sometimes the offering includes both, meaning you have to pay both an annual and a monthly. So when you're out there, I encourage you to be very skeptical if you are using somebody else's system that they've created for you. And there's no harm, no foul there, but they're offering you a product that has been created probably from multiple elements, and all of those elements are going to have some sort of fee associated with them. And it not only is it not just apples to apples, it's not apples to oranges, it's not apples to oranges to anything. I mean, it's apples to oranges to bananas to lettuce to, I mean, it's just remarkable how varied it is. So understand that there may be annual or monthly fees, and find out what those are for. Transaction fees, the same thing. There are offerings out there where you can purchase, your IRA can purchase cryptocurrency, but it typically has a fee. Again, no harm, no foul. Sometimes it's a percentage, sometimes it's flat. So understand that that's something that you want to calculate. And again, it kind of goes back to whether you're buy and hold or more of a trader. There's often an initial fee. Again, I found some that are a percentage just to have your initial setup fee, and some that are flat. So thinking about that is obviously a part of the calculation. There will often be a storage fee. A lot of times that may or may not be in the initial kind of fee schedule. So make sure that you ask about, hey, is this storage costing me anything? Is it rolled into some other fee? How does that all work? And this possibility of multiple vendors is one that, you may have your IRA money go to a vendor who is essentially a purchaser. So it may not go straight to an exchange. So you may have a purchaser who is going to an exchange or creating that change from fiat currency to cryptocurrency, or it may be at an exchange. That depends on how that IRA offering has been set up. Which players did they put into their equation, and what do they charge, and how do they work? And I've also seen in my kind of short survey out there that sometimes there's an investment minimum, and so that may be a one-time thing, but I've also seen some offerings where you actually have to contribute every year as part of their program. So all of those things may be out there on a given offering. All of them will affect your ROI and your agility. So they're all things that you might want to consider when you're thinking about, okay, if my general orientation is I want my IRA to invest in cryptocurrency, that's the beginning of this investigation and finding out, how much it's going to cost, what kind of abilities you have, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'm just going to give a really quick outline of, how the LLC system works, and why it offers the agility that it does. And I alluded to this earlier, and Alex is going to spend some more time on it a little bit later. But you have your IRA at Advanta. It creates an LLC that is wholly owned by the IRA usually. You usually name yourself the manager of the LLC. That gives you something called checkbook control. So you have the state documents of the LLC in one hand and a check of IRA money made out to the LLC in the other. You open a business checking account and you are writing checks on IRA money. Then that LLC, which is also a legal and financial entity, goes out to the exchange or exchanges or vendors that you want to use. And again, we're not giving any advice about exchanges or vendors or who you employ or who you engage, but your LLC is able to follow the strategy that you give it, right? And again, an LLC is often a little bit easier to understand entity than an IRA is. And it's a single signature person. So you as the manager of the LLC are the decision maker and the check signer and all that kind of thing. So you are the single source for authorization. Whereas when an IRA makes a purchase, obviously it goes to the account holder first, and then it comes back to us as the custodian to sign on behalf of the IRA. So your ability for the LLC to go out and to transact in the way that you want to certainly gives you a lot of agility. And our fees for checkbook control setup like this are very reasonable. They're established, a lot of times, a lot of people use it for real estate and things like that. So the fees for setting up a checkbook control LLC with us are very reasonable. They're easy to understand. There's not a lot of surprise to it. And then again, going back to the agility part, getting into cryptocurrencies is one, the ability to get out of them is another. And just remember that at some point when you want to take distribution, that distribution does need to run back to your IRA proper, because as the custodian for the IRA, we are the ones who register the distribution on behalf of the IRA, so that it goes into the IRS can see it. They know that the tax event is appropriate, et cetera, et cetera. So understand that this is what Advanta is doing from a strategy standpoint for those who want to have their IRA invest in cryptocurrency. And now I'm going to switch it over to Renika, my colleague Renika, and she's going to talk a little bit about kind of her personal perspective on this type of investment. And Renika, I'm going to switch it over to you. Haven't already.
Oh, thank you so much, Clay. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. We're just going to kind of go through and give you my personal perspective. I'm an active self-directed IRA investor. So prior to joining Advanta as one of the business development specialists, I'm actually an existing client of Advanta. So I just want to give you, again, my overview, high-level overview of what I look for when I invest in cryptocurrency. For me, I enjoy self-direction of the investment space just because it's really near limitless in terms of the different options I get to choose from. It allows me to be as creative as I want to, particularly with the digital asset space and cryptocurrency. For me, I see it as a blank canvas. I know Clay alluded to in terms of it can be overwhelming in terms of the amount of information. But for me, I aim to keep it as simple as possible. I look to invest in digital assets that has real value, and when it's too much information, I just tone out the noise. I'm sorry. So again, key thing is keep it simple, invest in value, not hype. That's my core focus. With any investment, we tell you to do your due diligence. So confer with your professional team, especially when it comes to crypto. We know the market is still very nascent, so there's just greater expectation that there's going to be volatility and instability. So it's imperative to continue to do your due diligence research before you add anything to your portfolio. For me personally, before I make an investment in my self-directed Roth account with Advanta, I vet it. I invest in it personally just to make sure that I'm comfortable with that particular digital asset. I look at the cryptocurrency space as a whole. It's the newest asset class since like the 1600s, I think. So it lets me know that cryptocurrency is here to stay. It's quite evident. You can see the shift to where it's being embraced by mainstream. It's being rolled out by different financial institutions and the global market as a whole. So it lets me know that, okay, I'm on the cusp, I'm in the right direction. That's just my personal point of view. In terms of the investment strategy, everyone's situation is different. I know Clay alluded to whether you're actively looking to trade or, more so buy and hold. My investment strategy within my IRA is slightly different from the personal holdings, crypto holdings that I have. So within my self-directed account, my strategy is more so from a longer term perspective. Just, my risk tolerance is a little bit higher just because I'm comfortable with the volatility, because I can sit on that asset for about 5, 10, 20 years, however long it takes for the market to really develop and mature. And then of course, I'll look to modify my guidelines based on those changes. But my focus is, high value assets that's going to have longer term appreciation. And into staying up to date on the latest news and trends. Obviously, it's impossible to know every crypto. That's not my personal goal, but there's enough resources and content creators out there that allows me to stay up to date on what's going on. Couple that with my own interests and further due diligence on a particular space within the crypto or digital asset. So I'm going to kind of give you some of the, if I can change my slide, some of the key drivers that I look for. It's not all inclusive, but just some of the benchmarks that I look for when I evaluate a cryptocurrency before I add it to my portfolio. Now, first and foremost, I look at the technology. Is the tech innovative? Is it transformative to where, okay, do I understand the use case? I don't have a technical background, but I go through and read the white paper just to kind of get an understanding of what the technology is and what is it that they're looking to do. What's the real world problem that they're looking to solve, or what gaps are they looking to fill? Is the technology influential in terms of creating the internet of value that we're hearing, or is it supporting the underlying infrastructure of the crypto ecospace as a whole? Can it achieve wide scale adoption? That's something that I look for in terms of the technology standpoint. For the team, I want to know exactly, who are the people behind the project? Do they have a great team in terms of leadership, or, who are the developers building the actual project or crypto? What are their credentials? What are their background? Do they have history in terms of success with other or previous digital assets? And then two, I'm looking at, does the project has longevity or sustainability? What's the clear direction if they have it? What's the big picture roadmap? Can it actually stand out from all of the digital assets out there? There's literally thousands of cryptos. So I'm trying to highlight and see, which project stands out. And of course, there's been a lot of call for, regulatory clarity. I think it's coming. There's going to be a consensus of, okay, this is the framework of how cryptocurrency is going to be governed. So, okay, what projects out there can actually withstand that once we do get that clarity? In terms of partnerships, okay, who are the major financial institutions or global entities that's, aligning themselves, that's endorsing these particular projects, or, maybe investing with in those projects. Okay. From just a financial overview in terms of the different cryptocurrencies, I look at first and foremost the market capitalization. So just to be able to kind of get a holistic view of the market as a whole, to be able to measure the different value for those cryptos. I know with cryptocurrency in general, we saw that it reached the $1 trillion threshold. While it's still small in comparison to the traditional market, I think a lot of major players and financial institutions are starting to take notice as this space, pretty much get its feet underneath the space as a whole. So I'm looking at, what is the circulating supply of the cryptocurrency, the supply and demand of that particular asset. In terms of price point, I hold digital assets personally, and also, in my IRA. So my strategy is slightly different. Obviously no one can time the market in terms of, when to get in or out, but I do keep an eye on and have predetermined price entry points. I'm a lot more flexible for the assets that I have within my IRA, just because, again, my strategy is a longer term hold. So I'm not, I don't mind the actual movement within the actual price points of that currency. And then, of course, diversification. One of the key things with self-directing as a whole is, the beauty is you get to invest in a long list of different things. Within the cryptocurrency space, yes, there is a strong correlation between the different crypto coins, but I look to invest in projects that fill different niches. For example, is this a currency that's focused on scalability within smart contracts, or are they looking to solve the international payment or cross-border payment issue? Is it a project that's centered around global trade and supply chain management? There's really good projects relating to that. A lot of investors, specifically in self-directed accounts, have real estate holdings. We see crypto projects that are coming along that are looking to tokenize, digital tokenized real estate. I'm sorry. So that's something that I definitely I'm looking to add to my. I'm personally vetting right now to add to my portfolio. And then, of course, just the gaming space. The gaming space as a whole. There are projects that are centered around looking to add value and propel the gaming industry as a whole. Some other factors that I look at, we hear, the push for inclusion and banking the unbanked. So I just try to stay up to date on that, looking at the different, regulation as it relates to news and trends, not just here in the US, but just globally as a whole. And then, of course, just getting a feel for the community sentiment relating to cryptocurrency. So that's just my quick high level overview of what I look for before I add a crypto to my portfolio. Alex, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Renika. So I'm going to go through a case study here in a moment, and just to keep in mind that we do see that we have plenty of questions coming in to us. So please just make sure that you keep them coming in. We will address those here in a minute. But specifically, what I'd like to cover is the structure that we use at Advanta for allowing clients to invest in cryptocurrency. And to kind of touch on what Clay had alluded to is that there's a ton of different ways that cryptocurrency can be purchased through Ira Custodians. And for the most part, the ones that do offer a dedicated platform to do so you are going to pay a pretty significant premium to do that. We feel at Advanta in the best interest of our clients to allow them the most flexibility, that utilizing an LLC really kind of hits to the core of what most cryptocurrency investors want. Now, certainly buying, holding is a very valid strategy. There's something to be said for hedging against where you think the particular tokens that you are investing in are going to be. But in large part, the market is centered around trading. It's centered around daily, if not hourly, market updates that people want to take advantage of. And you, as the client, having the direct interface with a particular brokerage platform will allow you to much better do that than going through someone that is kind of building a platform as an afterthought. So with the LLC route, it allows you to interface with any exchange platform that will allow for an LLC investor. Now, the big one, the by far and away the largest out there right now is Coinbase. They are not very LLC friendly. In our research and some stuff that I'm going to be doing as a follow-up to this, of actually showing people like, hey, here's like a screenshot set of what you're going to look at with a particular exchange. We're not necessarily going to get that kind of detail today, but with regard to that, Gemini and Kraken tend to be the two most flexible with regards to allowing investors to invest in a corporate entity. So I'm just using Gemini as a general example here. Now, by that, does that mean no means a endorsement that you should take and use them over anyone else if you have a particular feature of that exchange platform that you like. But with using the LLC, instead of having us as the custodian directly purchase the crypto for you, then have to build out, a system that is, really not within our wheelhouse, a brokerage platform where there's people out there that are developing these. That's kind of the main reason that we like to encourage clients to use LLCs if they're going to be doing this. So now in Joe's current situation, and I kind of show you from a very high level of how this exactly would work, he has $150,000 in a traditional IRAs and interested in investing in cryptocurrency. Now, he's decided that he'd like to have a mixture of Bitcoin, Ethereum, maybe some Dogecoin in there, and then you need to make sure that these particular types of cryptocurrencies are supported on the actual brokerage platform side of things. There's not going to be any restriction placed on the LLC's investments from the custodial side of things, which means that you get to shop around for exactly the right fit with regards to the exchange platform that you're using. So he projects that he will buy and hold the Bitcoin, and the Ethereum and the Doge he's going to trade on maybe a more of a daily or hourly basis. Remember, with the LLC, the IRA wholly owns this LLC, and we'll kind of get into the specific structure of that here in a minute in the case study. So you don't have to come back to the custodian to say, hey, I'd like to buy this. Do you support it? If the wallet that you're electing to use for your LLC supports the type of cryptocurrency that you're looking to buy, and the exchange is willing to interface with an LLC, those are the kind of the main factors you need to look at. And if that does hold true, then really there's not going to be any limit to exactly what you can and cannot accomplish with regards to these types of investments. So the first step of the process, if you're interested in using an LLC for these types of investments, is to get the account open, because us as the custodian, and as Clay had mentioned, we have to show proper holding and proper custody of the actual asset. Now, the asset in this case, although later on down the road will specifically be cryptocurrency, from our aspect and perspective, it is going to be a private LLC that your IRA holds. So when you look at your account statement at Advanta, you're not going to see Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Ethereum, Ripple. You're not going to see all that. You're just going to see Advanta IRA holding ABC LLC with a value of X. Then subsequently, once you have moved those funds into that LLC, that's when you can look at your holdings. But the first thing we need to do is make sure that the LLC is set up correctly, which does involve utilizing the account number, because the IRA needs to be named as member. Most people sometimes are under the slightly errant idea that you have to, the way that you set up an LLC is just go to your state's Department of Corporations, whatever that may be. Different states have different departments that handle this. You register the name with an LLC, you get your tax ID number, and you're done. Well, that may certainly hold true for just starting an LLC. More specifically, the operating agreement is what is going to show the shareholders of that LLC. It is going to create it as an investment for the IRA. So the first step in the process, in order to have that document drafted correctly, is to set up the IRA. Doesn't take very long. It's a pretty straightforward process. Now, in this case, Joe needs to choose what state he wants to set up the LLC in. He needs to file the articles with the particular state. Articles of organization are what you receive from a particular state once you have registered in that state for your LLC. You have to make sure that the name is not taken already. There's a few different steps of fees you're going to have to pay for that, but they're relatively nominal. And you don't have to register the LLC in the state that you live, which is another really big benefit. Some people that live in states that have more cumbersome requirements for LLC maintenance and administration, typically those are going to be northeastern states and West Coast states. And some Midwest states like Illinois as well. But for the most part, most people that we see here in Advanta, granted we are located in Florida, so we have a lot of Florida clients, use LLCs based in Florida. It's cheap, it's relatively easy to get it set up. Georgia, most states in the Southeast, including Texas, are all really easy to interface with, and there's not much of a real perceived benefit of doing something somewhere else other than where you live. Now, particular brokerages may not necessarily like the fact that you are a resident of one state with an LLC in another state, and some of them even have restrictions on where you can actually set up, yourself and how they report, because cryptocurrency platforms now, under guidance from the IRS, have to report taxable gains and losses of your particular tax lots of what you purchased. So if you bought Bitcoin and sold it for a gain, and even if you exchanged into another cryptocurrency and didn't bring it down to a fiat level, then back into cryptocurrency, that is still going to be a taxable event. And then that's the really big benefit of using an IRA or an LLC by the extension of an IRA, or an LLC through the extension of an IRA, that you're not going to have to pay any taxes, which is the huge benefit to this. So kind of circling back is that you don't necessarily have to have it registered in the state that you live in. I do know some providers do require everything to be within the same state. So keep that in mind. Always check with the exchange first. Again, I'm using Gemini here just because of the experience I've had with registering, the fact that they do accept corporate accounts, and that's essentially what it would be. So in order to get that LLC set up, it is not just going to the state to have it registered. You need to have an operating agreement drafted. Now, if you've never done that, we're certainly happy to help. We have a book of business that we can refer out to that will help you get those kind of documents drafted. You can really use whomever you'd like. You can shop it around. You can get the best price for it. I encourage people to do so. Now, on that operating agreement, the IRA is going to be listed as the 100% owner. It is the member of that LLC. Now, the naming of that obviously has to come after the IRA is established. So keep that in mind, that you need to start the IRA first and then go through the LLC. So the articles don't need to mention the LLC or don't need to mention the IRA. You know, a lot of times the issues I see with people doing this, as Joe is with this case study, is that people will think that, well, my IRA owns it, I need to put that on the articles, I need to name the, you know, when it comes to naming like the manager, when it comes to naming other things, you put the IRA there. Not the case. You are acting as the manager. You're the one that's setting it up with a particular state that you're registered with, because when you take your articles and your tax ID number for that LLC to a particular brokerage, they're going to want to see your information on it, because you're the one that's going to be authorized to execute trades on behalf of that entity. So keep that in mind. Personal information goes on registering the LLC. The IRA goes on the operating agreement, which is not necessarily a publicly provided document unless it's unless you have the discretion and do so. Slide. Okay. So now what happens? You have the LLC, you've gone through it. We have to sign that LLC operating agreement as the member, and then we issue the funds to that LLC's business checking account that you've opened because you've also applied for a tax ID number. Now, at that point, it's free reign for you as the client. You don't have to interface with Advanta to say, hey, you know, I'd like to invest with, you know, I'd like to have an account with Kraken. I'd like to have an account with Gemini. I'd like to do other different things with regards to where I purchase these things from. That is all your discretion as the manager. So at that point, Joe decided that he wants to use Gemini. Joe is the manager, and by extension, the LLC has to go through all of the compliance and know your customer procedures that Gemini has. So those are things like providing them with a copy of your articles, providing them a copy of the SS4. The SS4 is the tax ID application confirmation you get from the IRS, because you have to have a tax ID for this LLC, which allows you to, one, open the bank account that the monies are, the fiat currencies received into, and two, allows you to properly open the account through the LLC underneath of whichever brokerage you decided to go to. So keep in mind that although the assets are going to be in the name of the IRA, and people rightfully so are concerned with their personal information and maybe their personal social being tied to anything with regards to their IRA, when you interface with an exchange, they need to know who you are. They'll, you know, verify the entity, but they need to know who you directly as a person are. So they may ask you for your personal social as well as the social for the entity that's interfacing. So you have to know who's actually accessing the platform to make trades and do things. So keep in mind the likelihood of you having to provide your personal social security number as opposed to just the tax ID number for the entity may be the case. So don't let that frighten you. If you have questions, we can certainly help walk you through that. Now, going forward, Joe has integrated, he has gotten everything approved with the brokerage that he's decided to go to. So what does he do at that point? Well, with cryptocurrency, the cryptocurrencies have to be stored somewhere. So your hashes and keys, with what a lot of people do is hold them in cold storage. For those of you not familiar, it's a piece of hardware. The big one in the marketplace is the Nano Ledger, also a company named Trezor, Trezor, makes one. But essentially it is offline. You plug in your computer, you migrate your cryptocurrency to that wallet, and then, you know, it is completely offline. There is what's deemed to be, and these storages kind of range from the coldest being the most secure offline to hot storage, meaning that it is maybe just held directly on the exchange platform that you're using. Now, for security reasons, many people like not to just hold it right there. They want to move back and forth. But keep in mind that there's potentially going to be transaction cost for moving cryptocurrency through a blockchain to a wallet specifically. So if you're sweeping everything out of, let's say, your Gemini account, don't want to use any of their hot storage, and then you want to transfer it back into that account, there's going to be some cost benefit that needs to be done, because exchanges of cryptocurrency on blockchains do have a transaction cost. Now, if you're going to use cold storage, you absolutely need to do it on a separate piece of hardware for your IRA-owned LLC. Even if you are a cryptocurrency investor personally, and you have your own personal wallet, and I know most of these wallets you can set up with a sub-account. You know, you can label things, especially with the Nano Ledger. You know, you have different plugins. You can create different accounts on them and segregate stuff out. For the nominal cost of what the hardware is to have cold storage for for yourself, I always recommend clients get a new separate one, just have two separate pieces of hardware for your cold storage. There are issues with mixing personal and tax qualified assets and funds that the IRS has, maybe not written specifically to cryptocurrency, but the general rule is that you need to always have things at arm's length between your personal and your IRA investments. And then all the trades that you're doing are reported back to the LLC. And you can use multiple exchanges. You don't have to be married to one. But keep in mind that the LLC needs to be completely segregated with regard to the storage of your cryptocurrency, any cash that you hold in an applicable bank account, all needs to be kept separate from each other or from yourself personally. Otherwise, you can get into some issues with the IRS. Now, let's say you've done the investing through the LLC, and these are retirement accounts. They are meant to benefit people. As part of the great tax advantage of them, you get either tax deferred or tax free growth. But if you want to take some of the funds or cryptocurrency out of that LLC, there is a correct way to do it. So you don't necessarily have to liquidate a cryptocurrency holding if you just want to take it out of an LLC. But it does have to come from the LLC to Advanta as the custodian of the account before we can distribute it back out to you, because irregardless of whether or not it is a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA or anything else, we still have to do tax reporting on it. So the order of operations for you to do that, if you have cryptocurrency held in an LLC, would be first to send it to us as the custodian if you don't want to liquidate. So sending it to us, and then we would distribute it back out to you, and you can keep that. You can keep it in a cryptocurrency. We can handle that type of exchange. We have our own wallet here that we can facilitate that through. Keep in mind it's not an instantaneous process, but we are able to do in-kind distributions of cryptocurrency. Conversely, if you'd rather just liquidate it and then send the cash to us for us to send to you, that is perfectly all right as well. But I do like to make sure that clients understand is that we have the systems and the ability to take stuff in kind and then distribute it back out in kind. So if you're really happy with the performance of a particular cryptocurrency, maybe don't want to necessarily sell it, then by all means, you can send it back to us, we can send it to you. But that really is a very important thing, is that if you ever need to take money out of the LLC that your IRA owns for a distribution purpose, it has to first come back to us. You can't rip a check directly out of it to yourself personally. Now, here's a few rules that need to be followed with regard to the IRA itself. The LLC must be manager managed. A lot of people, when they have personal LLCs in their personal name, they're member managed, which in that case would completely defeat the purpose of you having checkbook control if we still had to sign everything. You can have more than one IRA in an LLC. So if you have a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA, or maybe it's you and a spouse or you and a friend, you can form multi-member LLCs where you pull the money together and then interface that singular LLC with a particular exchange. So that is definitely an option, but that does kind of play back into some IRS regulations in that sometimes you're not allowed to change those percentages if you're investing with, let's say, your spouse's account and your account. And it also will require that you file a federal tax return as well. So single member LLCs are really nice, sleek, and really efficient for doing this kind of investing. But if you really wanted to increase your capital base to a singular entity, that is a problem. And then you just need to keep in mind, again, with those percentages, it's very important. The IRS regulation code that you can look at with regards to disqualified benefits between individuals can be referenced on IRS code 4975. And remember, single member entities are generally considered what's called a disregarded entity. It's treated as a pass-through, so it doesn't need to file a federal tax return because everything comes directly back to the IRA, which is tax exempt. And if anyone's curious to know some more legal support for using an IRA-owned LLC and checkbook control, I put up some of the more popular cases to look at. Swanson v. Commissioner and the tax court memo of T.L. Ellis are two good resources if you're looking more towards the LLC compliance side of things. Good cases to take a look at. And before we get to questions, one of the biggest things that I see a lot of with people coming in to do investing in general with an IRA is they think that they can only self-direct or invest in alternatives with a certain type of an account, which is so far from the truth. It honestly hurts. You can invest any of these different types of an account on the screen right now into cryptocurrency through an LLC here at Advanta. It doesn't have to be a Roth or traditional. You can use a solo 401k plan. You can use a health savings account or even education savings account if you'd like to invest in cryptocurrency. So just understand that the the platform is very broad, and you don't necessarily have to define yourself to one type of account versus another. You can really use what you have. It doesn't necessarily have to just be one item. So that really kind of wraps it up for our presentation today. We will be putting this presentation recording on our YouTube channel. Please keep up to our events. We have blogs that are regularly updated. And don't leave if you ask a question, because we are going to get into those right now. So let's go back up to the top. Okay.
I think the first one, Alex, is what exchanges are supported by Advanta accounts?
Sure. And that's a great question. It's not necessarily that we have a preference for that, but the platforms that are most used by our clients are going to be Kraken and Gemini. Used to be that Coinbase would handle corporate accounts, but they don't any longer as of this presentation, or the process has been too cumbersome. I've heard a lot of issues from our clients to that effect. So the first two places that I would tell people to go would either be Gemini or Kraken if you're looking to utilize an LLC into that.
Yeah, and I'll also just add that we at Advanta, we're not advocating any particular exchange, and there may be other ones out there. There are exchanges all over the world. And so if you really wanted to get into it and investigate it, any exchange that will accept a corporate account is going to be available to you via the LLC kind of checkbook control model we're talking about. It doesn't need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Someone asked, I tried to get an account at Kraken and they don't allow users who live in New York. They do allow Florida. So would it be allowed through my Advanta IRA? So that kind of has a few levels to that question. If they want people that live in, or entities that are from Florida, yes, if you register an LLC in Florida, like I said, it doesn't have to be in the state you live in. But they may have an issue if the manager is located in New York. I've never personally gone through that particular question, but if the LLC is registered in Florida, that's where they're doing their compliance against, and then they are then in turn doing their know your customer against you personally. It would seem to me that would work, but I just don't necessarily have a definitive answer to that. And let's see, Nathan has a follow-up I'll answer. I would never do this, but what prevents people from funneling money out of their IRA because of the fact that you can't trace crypto? I've heard, I don't understand the details. Well, it's really no different than cash. If you moved cash to an LLC and then wrote yourself a check, really, we wouldn't necessarily have any knowledge of you doing that. Through an IRS audit, they would find out about it. There's no particular safeguard, which is, kind of maybe a little bit of an alarming statement, but it also is the fundamental aspect of what allows you to invest as a checkbook control entity. Because if we were to have to do, let's say, a daily audit of what your holdings are and everything like that, then it would really get away from, the freedom that this kind of investment structure affords. But there is some personal responsibility that needs to be taken in on that as well.
And then I think I'll take the next one here, Alex. It's why can't the IRA invest directly? Why do you need the extra expense of the LLC? And it's a great question. And you don't actually, from a purely technical standpoint. But like, as I mentioned before in the beginning, the IRA custodian, wherever you have your IRA, it's going to have a custodian, and they have to meet certain requirements for executing transactions and control of the assets. And so there are IRA custodians out there, or IRA crypto investment tools, companies that say, hey, we will package up the IRA plus, let's say, the ability to buy these select, 8 or 10 currencies and give you a trading platform and things like that. So what they've done is assemble some of the constituent tools for the execution of IRA purchase of cryptocurrencies, and they offer it to you as a package. Now, often there's charges for that, so whether it's by trade, per trade, flat, or percentages or whatever, they're going to charge you for the way that they assembled those pieces that all make up the ecosystem that can purchase the cryptocurrency. So technically speaking, an IRA does not need an LLC to purchase cryptocurrency. The reason that we do it that way is so that you have the ability to choose exchanges or vendors, choose your storage, and to be able to control the costs the way you want to, rather than buying a package that somebody else put together. But make no mistake, it's not required. You can have an IRA offering that will offer some sort of purchase ability associated with it that does not have an LLC in the middle. It's a good question.
Yeah, good answer. So we got a few more questions. So when I get an EIN for the LLC, is the taxpayer's social security number used on the EIN application? The answer is yes, but the reason that they're asking for the taxpayer's social is because the IRS, just as with any financial organization, has to know who they're interfacing with. So when you apply for that, they need to say, hey, who's on the other end of that computer screen, and the way they do it is confirming that the applicant's social security number. It doesn't necessarily go into anything that will create a taxable liability for you, but they need to know, who is applying for that tax ID, and then that's, the information that they use for that. Abe asks, can I transfer part of my current traditional IRA to convert it to self-direction with you? Absolutely. Give one of us a call. Our contact information is right there on the screen. We'd be more than happy to help you out with that. So Gary asks, can you open an IRA account with crypto? It's a great question. I've covered it in some of the other crypto webinars I've done. Unfortunately, no, because cryptocurrency, although has the name currency in its name, it is not a currency as defined by the Treasury Department or the IRS. It's considered personal taxable property. And the only way that you can make a contribution to an IRA out of your own personal earnings, so your $6,000 or $7,000 a year, is in US dollars.
And then there's one that says, does the LLC file a tax return? The answer is no. So it's, again, considered pass-through for tax purposes, and the IRA as the owner, that tax status is the one that carries the day. So the LLC does not file a tax return.
And I would add to that, so that's right most of the time for our clients. However, if you do have a multi-member LLC, it is not then considered a disregarded pass-through automatically. You're going to then, if you have a multi-member LLC, at least have to file a federal partnership return, although there may not be any taxes associated with it. Keep that in mind if you have a group of people, or maybe you and your spouse or you and someone else want to form a multi-member LLC to increase the capital that you can invest, that you then in turn would be kind of getting rid of that benefit of having a single member LLC that's not required to do that, and then be paying extra money to file that return. So sometimes people will do multiple single member LLCs as opposed to doing one multi-member LLC for that very reason.
Yep, good clarification.
Let's see. Jeff asks, what is the IRS form the LLC files to report the value of the IRA LLC? That's not an IRS form, that's an internal Advanta form, because we have to update the fair market value of all of our clients' holdings every year. So in order to do that with a cryptocurrency type account, you would provide us with an unaudited balance sheet of the LLC. So as of 12/31, you would show us a bank statement of what's in that LLC. You would also just essentially, if you're only interfacing with one broker, crypto broker, you would just print out your holdings as of 12/31 and then provide that as well. And then you sign our fair market value form. It's not necessarily an IRS form, but we do use that information to file IRS form 5498 on your IRA's behalf, which is part of our responsibility acting as custodian of these accounts to do so on your behalf. So it's not an IRS form per se that you fill out, but it does allow us to do the IRS reporting that we're required to do on your behalf, or your IRA's behalf. And all right, looks like don't have any questions. We'll probably keep this on here. We have plenty of people still on the call, so if you have a question you want to answer, go ahead and ask them. I typically, in these things, when there's about maybe half or a third of the people left, so we're at 59 right now. So yeah, if you have any questions, we'll keep it open for a few more moments, and then we'll let everyone get back to their day. Actually, I think I missed one question. Someone asked, what's the name of the crypto, the storage devices? The two most popular are ones issued by a company called Ledger. They have the Nano Ledger S, which is a popular one right now. Also, a company named Trezor also provides hard storage. Is cold storage a mining rig? No, those are two completely separate things. Mining rigs are using compute power of typically graphical processing units, so video cards, in conjunction with each other to actually perform the hashes on a particular blockchain for the bonus of cryptocurrency issued by creating that hash, which is a really kind of technical way of saying mining is verifying transactions for a reward on that blockchain. Cold storage really is just the piece of hardware you use to hold your cryptocurrency. That's not online. Is there a minimum amount to open the IRA for investing in crypto? No, we will be happily take anyone's account of any size and help you out with your goals with that. Let's see, how do you apply for an EIN so a tax return is not required? So the EIN basis does not really determine if it's a multi-member or single-member LLC that would be exempt from that. It is on the management of that LLC to know when or when not to file a return. So by virtue of that, you're filing a tax ID number for an LLC. Now, depending on if you file for one for a limited partnership, that would indicate that that is an automatically taxable entity. But if you're just applying for one as an LLC, that automatically doesn't kind of pull you into having to file one or having like a record with the IRS that you have to file for that. Let's see. Someone else asked, oh yeah, remember you cannot open an IRA with crypto. It has to be US dollars. You cannot be in another, okay, as mentioned, you cannot be in another state to manage account. You can absolutely be in a separate state to manage an IRA. The crypto provider might take umbrage with the fact that the manager is living in a separate state from where the LLC is chartered, but that's not necessarily an issue I have information that I could convey to you on. You would have to check with the applicable brokerage to see if when they're doing their customer confirmations of the entity and you personally as the manager, if that would be an issue that they had. Abe, we'd be happy to do that. My recommendation to you is that watch the Roth conversion webinar that I did on our YouTube channel before the end of the year, and then give Clay, Renika, or myself a call, and we can kind of go through what the total implications of that would be, and also any fees if you have questions about. But that's a whole hour-long presentation in and of itself for tax implications on conversions. Well, I don't see too many more questions. We got people filing out. I think we'll go ahead and end it here. Clay and Renika, I really appreciate you both taking time out of your day to do this. I really enjoyed working with you both on a three-headed approach to a webinar. It's great to have people with a more personal experience on the investing side of this stuff than I have. I'm more of the technical aspect person with this stuff for Advanta. So thank you both very much. Have anything else to say before we go ahead and wind it down?
Not for me, just thanks everybody for spending some time with us, and you know, good luck out there and happy investing, and let us know if we can be of service.
Same here. Thank you, everyone.
Great. I think, Clay, you have to end it on your side.
Okay.
All right.
Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.